Welcome to the Alchemy of Ascension Season 2, where we are exploring our galactic origins and becoming multidimensional. I'm your host, Waxela Sananda, and today I have a wonderful and lovely featured guest, Kerry K. Welcome, Kerry.
Waxela, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It's awesome to be here. Thank you.
I'm so happy, and I've been looking forward to this conversation. You are just such a bright light. And so let me share just a little bit about you first before we jump in. Kerry K has an extraordinary gift. She facilitates interactions with people that catalyze them to remember who they are. She works with the Galactic Federation of Light to support humanity in connecting with their galactic identity and to reconnect with the truth of who they are. And while that's a very modest, in a way, bio, there's so much there. So I'm like, okay, where shall we begin? And I think it's good because I haven't interviewed you before. So for many of the viewers, you may be new. I would love to start at the beginning of your awakening or your origin story. How did you begin the work that you're doing now?
Wow, I think like everybody, I began looking back in hindsight, I can see that like everybody, my story began in childhood. There were so many things always bringing me to awakening. I grew up in a home, and it was such a strange experience, Waxela. I grew up in a home with a Jewish mom and a Christian dad, neither of which really followed the faith. So what I had was an open playing field. I had a very, very psychic mom and a very psychic grandmother. So when I was around about 12, I already knew, oh, I don't need to go to university. My path is something spiritual, although I didn't know what. Now, I look back and I can see that I did actually know exactly what. I just wouldn't have had the vocabulary back then. Because back then, there were those flying dreams. And I think a lot of people listening, just like you are, will go, Those flying dreams are so important, aren't they? It's like, these are our origin stories, and these are our innate knowings. And they played and played and played on my mind for years. Because, of course, and I know that this is a familiar story, in my dreams, I knew I could fly. I could fly. And when I woke up in the morning, I couldn't. And it was the most confusing thing for me because every night when I dreamed, there I was flying. And in my dream, I would say to myself, oh, I finally remembered and I'm never going to forget it again. I finally have got it. It was like some muscle in my body that was hidden. And I suddenly found the secret compartment in my dream. And there I was flying. And in the morning, same thing. So I knew that it was true somewhere, somehow. And it interested me enough that I was kind of like a dog with a bone and I couldn't let it go. It interested me enough, pair that with ongoing dreams of galactic connections, flying on UFOs, talking to extraterrestrials, having these phenomenal experiences that for a long time I thought were dreams. But life started to change for me when I hit my teenage years. And that's a very important thing because as we hit our teenage years, the pineal gland is actually catalyzed as we hit puberty. And not many people know this. And so we almost let it go to waste, but we have untold potential in our puberty years. And that for me was very, very true because that's when the dreams amplified. And luckily, I didn't have somebody in my face saying to me, oh, Kerry, they're just dreams. Luckily, I didn't have that kind of oppression, and there was a huge freedom for me to experience what I wanted to pursue, to explore. There were the most phenomenal nighttime conversations with me and my mom, talking about the color of my aura, talking about what UFO I had been in, because she believed me. She always believed me. She had those dreams herself. Perhaps not as frequently, but that was very cool. Having somebody that young and having somebody go, yeah, I do believe you. I know that that was real. So the validation was monumentally important for me. But there you go. That's the origin. That's the real origin story. Something grabbed hold of me and said, the waking reality that you see is pretend. The waking reality that you see is far from real. The dreamscape is where the real stuff is happening. And then I remember thinking, what if I could bring the dreamscape stuff, which were these amazing nighttime conversations, what if I could bring that into my waking world? And little did I know it, but that was entirely possible. And that was the true origin of my story, where I learned to do just that. Because I would take that into my dream. And I would say to the non-terrestrial beings of my dream, I would say to them, is this possible? Can I do this? Can I bring these interactions into my waking world? And initially they said, no, you can't. And I would say, why? I really want to. And they would say, well, because it's going to change your frequency. And if your frequency changes too early on, you will be like a domino that creates a domino, an unwanted domino effect in the world at the wrong time. But it will happen at the right time. And so I probably nagged for a little bit, but learned to accept that there would be a day that I would have these conversations in my waking world. And so, yeah, this was really the backstory to where it all began. I had an absolute knowing that that material world around me, it was as fickle and as paper thin as anybody could imagine. I almost felt like I could put my hand through it. It felt so unsolid all the time, regardless of what my eye said. My eye said to me, the wall that you're looking at is solid, the chair you're sitting on is solid, but something in me knew, I don't think so. So I learned to trust the other world. I learned to trust the energetic world. And I learned to speak and tune in and listen to those conversations, and not just with the non-terrestrials. I learned also that there was myself in higher forms that I could connect to. That was terribly exciting. Looking at somebody in the room and going, gosh, she looks just like me. And then I remember the Galactic saying, she is you. She is you. At that stage, it was probably in 20 years' time. And I was transfixed because I thought, wow, if that's how I turn out, and I think I turned out okay, because they were, from where I was sitting as a young person on the planet, she seemed so wise and so all-knowing, and there was this vibratory field, a very recognizable vibratory field around her, and I wanted more of it. So all of that was laid before me. And how could I then go into a slumber again? So thankfully, awakening happened very early and has continued. It never stops. It happens every day. It's an ongoing process.
Yes, indeed. Thank you for sharing that. And what a gift to have your mother be so open and help you evolve, where, you know, that's not everybody's experience. It's somewhat rare. So I absolutely love that. Now, one thing that you mentioned that I kind of got hung up on, I want to know more about. You said the pineal gland is catalyzed in puberty. Can you explain what you mean by catalyzed?
So it's kind of like brought into awareness. Let me describe the energetic picture. It looks energetically like this, because I see a lot of things energetically, which creates this amazing kaleidoscope, like a visual kaleidoscope for me. And it's through these visual kaleidoscopes that insights and understandings come. So what it looks like is you're born, and at birth, the pineal gland is absolutely wide open and flooding with light. It's a conduit for light. Then As you go from about the age of 2 to about the age of 7, it begins to kind of get a bit darker. That's the word. It gets a little bit darker, it gets a little bit quieter in there. Then from about the age of 7 to the age of about 12 or 13, it's even darker. Meaning, again, it's just in slumber state. That's all. It's not a bad thing. It's in slumber state. Unless, of course, that child is somehow catalyzed, like in my case. I was catalyzed by a parent who made those conversations available to me, right? But for the average person, there's a very normal slumber period. Then puberty happens, hormones start churning around in the body, and with all of the hormonal rebalancing that takes place in puberty and these huge surges of hormones, so melatonin begins to be excreted from the pineal gland more furiously than ever before. Along with melatonin is the balancing serotonin. Again, now we're experiencing it at high levels, but both of these, melatonin and serotonin, are derived from the pineal gland and the state and the health of the pineal gland. But nonetheless, in puberty, not just from a physiological point of view, but also from a spiritual point of view, you are now coming into a maturity. And there's a spiritual maturity that's activated in puberty. And it is because of that spiritual maturity that the pineal gland comes online again. It begins to flash. And if you can work with teenagers and speak to them, not just about the body changes, but about the changes of perception. Because never in all of our lives is our brain more active than in puberty. Which is kind of ironic because it's in puberty that most adults will say, oh, my teenage son, my teenage daughter is so forgetful, or they're so scattered and kind of all over the place. That's true. But that's because certain parts of the brain in puberty are being activated and stimulated, not necessarily in congruence with other parts of the brain. That only comes later. That comes around about the age of 18, where we can now put it all together. But from the very, very early part of puberty, the brain is coming online in a new way. And absolutely the pineal gland is a part of that. So this is very often where we see teenagers becoming, unfortunately, quite rebellious. They feel very misunderstood. They really want a sense of identity. I look back to myself as a teenager. What did I want? I wanted a sense of, who is this person called Kerry? Who is she? That's what I really wanted. Now, if we had the opportunity to facilitate not just conversations, but explorations with teenagers that show them the mystery and the miracle of who they are at that age, wow, we would be looking at a totally different up-and-coming generation into adulthood, because they'd have a very deep-seated sense of who else they are, beyond what the magazines say, beyond what the peer pressure says, that have a really real sense of who I am on the inside. Now, if that could be grounded and anchored into us at those formative years, humanity would look a lot different. But it's okay. You know what? That wasn't the experience for most current day adults. That's okay. That doesn't mean we've somehow lost out. It just means we get to catch up now. That's all. And that's always the case with the pineal gland, just since that was the one you asked me about. It's one of my key focuses is on the relationship between the pineal gland and the heart, in fact, because the two work hand in hand. So we have a lot of people in the world saying, oh, we've got to open the third eye, open the pineal gland. And by the way, the third eye and the pineal gland are not even the same thing. But we don't necessarily understand our own God-given miraculous nature. Again, it's okay, nobody's ever taught us. But when we come into awakening, what we're going to see is, first of all, there is an interrelationship between the entire diencephalon, that is, that inner part of the brain, which is called the third eye. The entirety of that area which includes the pituitary gland. It includes the pineal gland. It's the hypothalamus. It's this incredible deep, almost like a cavern inside the brain. That's the seat of the soul. That's the third eye. And when that becomes stimulated and awakened and bridged to the heart, okay, now miracles. Now miracles happen, and we call them miracles only because from the third dimensional human perspective, they appear to be miracles. But actually, it's our true nature. Miracles isn't even the right word. It just looks that way. True nature. Our true nature is miraculous. But that's how it comes online, is when we get to bring these two into balance and into harmony. We're phenomenal beings, Waxela. I know you know that. And I know that so much of the audience listening knows that as well. But we don't necessarily know how amazing we are. Like we could hope, we could imagine, we could dream, but until we've actualized and felt it for ourselves, we can't even, we really can't. We can't think that big. We can't imagine that we, these little human things, could be this big and this powerful and this amazing, this divine, truly divine. And of course we are. So it's kind of like we are the best kept secret in our own lives. We are the secret. We are the thing that we're unfolding. We are the thing that we've come for. Under the guise of, oh, I've come for planet Earth, I've come for humanity. Yeah, those things could be true. But the ultimate prize is that aligned higher self. So we use the word higher self as if that's like this far away being. But the higher self is here to be embodied in the physical form. That's the higher self that we're becoming. So did that answer your question about the puberty and the pineal?
Yes, that was wonderful. And I've never heard anyone explain it that way. So thank you for that. And it's interesting because I've been feeling more and more to start working with younger people and create a course for teens. And like, that's why.
There you go.
That's it.
Do it.
I love that.
Do it.
I love that. Yeah. And I have an
Yeah.
11-year-old son who, I'm really working on getting him to start meditating. It's not his first choice, but he was very psychic as when he was younger and would express things openly. But now he's 11 and that's not interesting to him now. It's not, he's shut that down. So I'm looking forward to that coming back online.
Yeah, they think it's not cool either, by the way.
Right.
It's not interesting and it's not cool.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the main thing. And with my daughter too, I have an older daughter in college. At that age, it was mom's weird stuff. And he said to me the other day, he's like, I just want to be normal. I'm like, well, you're in the wrong family for that.
I know, sorry, but it's not going to happen here. Yeah, I've got a son who's 14, so I understand what you're saying. For him also, this isn't the cool stuff to talk about, Mom. Right. But what I do find, and this might be of value for people with children, whether they're teens or not, what I do find is they are so advanced and they feel so slowed down by us. And if you think of their world, it's a very fast-paced world. It's way more technologically engaged than the world I grew up in. So they're used to the pace being a lot quicker. Now, if you and I sit to meditate, and the majority of the audience, let's just say that we sat down together and we meditated, we'd have an intro, the voice would lower, the body would relax. But for a teen, that is way too long. Way too long. And I think about my daughter who's 5. For her as well, that would be ridiculously long. So what I find works really well for them is close your eyes, connect with, I call it the inner light. You can call it anything you want to. For my son at a point, I called it the inner dragon. For my daughter at a point, it was the inner fairy. But in whatever words you say, the inner light. Close your eyes, connect to the inner light, and let's just be there. And honestly, 10 seconds, and you might think I'm exaggerating, but I'm really not. 10 seconds, 30 seconds, maximum of 1 minute is all they really need. And what you're looking for in those 10, 30, 60 seconds, whatever it is, what you're looking for is there's one moment where the breath just automatically drops and gets deeper. It's okay. It'll become shallow breath again afterwards. Just look for that one moment and know that in that one moment, they've gotten what you and I as adults would have gotten in an hour. We totally underestimate the speed at which they connect and the speed at which they work. And that's also why we lose their interest, because as adults, our body was wired for another world. Theirs is not. Their body is wired for the world that is still becoming, which is why, it's not so interesting. But if you just try, shorten the time and trust that their innate divinity can do in 10 seconds what you and I could do in, let's say, half an hour. Give them a full minute and they've really and truly connected to the depth of themselves. And they might choose after that and say, well, that was really nice, Mom, could we do that next time I'm doing an exam, for example, or could we do that when I'm not busy? Or they might invite you back for more, which is always glorious if you get the invite, right? But that's just my sixpence worth is try and lessen the time, because they're so advanced. And in puberty, because the pineal gland is flooding already, that's why they need such a short time.
Beautiful.
The insights are so available.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And my daughter did come around. She's 22 now, so she was like, "Oh, this is cool stuff now. Show me more." But it took. She had to become a young adult to want that. And I just love that. I love that we're talking about the kids and how connected they are, and that connection is so important for them. And another thing is daydreaming. My son's a bit of a daydreamer, and I like to protect that space. A lot of the world will say, "Don't daydream," like in school, and stop daydreaming. But I'm like, oh, if he's daydreaming, like, I won't interrupt him. That's important time. That's that's
it is.
connection. Yeah.
It's amazing time. Yeah. Well done.
Okay, well, I want to get into, and I know that you have this story and it's on your website. You called it your I remember who I am moment, when you experienced yourself as one with all that is, which some people call samadhi. I would love to hear about that experience, because I know it was very transformational for you.
Yeah, it was. And I've had many moments. I've been blessed. I've had many moments. At the age of 13, I had a conversation with a being who identified himself as Christ. It was a defining, transformative moment in my life. So I've had these phenomenal experiences. But in 2016, I went through what many people will be familiar with, and that is the dark night of the soul. So there I was in the thick of it, and nothing humbles you, or certainly nothing had humbled me more than being there in that deep, dark, scary, lonely place. I was so fragile and so human in that place. And I remember turning to my guides and saying, help me, just help me. I had gotten to a place that I literally couldn't anymore. When a person gets to a place where they say, I don't have the strength anymore. That's where I was. And so it's not that I'd never asked for help before. It's not that I'd never asked for advice or input before. It was my depth of surrender that made the difference, because my surrender was huge. My surrender was a complete acknowledgement that I had burned every resource within me that I had, and I had nothing left. And so they said, oh, great. Yeah. we've worked really long and hard to bring you to this place, so we will help you. And it began probably 3 months prior to the actual, what I call the Samadhi moment. It had kind of brewed and built up. There's a course that I run actually, which is based on that 3-month build-up that I had. In that 3-month build-up, there was the harmonizing of the two hemispheres of the brain. The left and the right hemisphere, teaching them how to become a whole brain as opposed to two separate, completely unrelated aspects of self, because they're so opposite. The linearity of the left brain and the creativity of the right brain, and they never speak. They're like strangers to each other, and they're like different personalities. You know, the one is like the businessman and the other one is like the crazy hippie, and both are extremes, but both are us. And what would happen if these two aspects came together? So that was a 3-month-long process. There was lots of coaching, and it started there. Exercises to bring the two hemispheres online into higher thought, into a deeper connection, a deeper unification to each other. Learning to harmonize the brain waves so that they were now operating in unison. Whilst all of this was happening, I became aware for the first time of the inner brain, which I call the inner brain. The diencephalon is the correct name. And like I said earlier when I spoke about it, it's the seat of the soul, the pineal, the pituitary, the hypothalamus. It's all part of this really miraculous place within our physical form. And I know what I'm going to say is so cliche. We look for God outside, but God is within. Oh, yawn, boring. We've heard that, right? We've all heard that, and we can all agree to it. But again, until you've actualized, it's words. So this was my actualization process. I didn't know it, but it became my actualization process, where the brain was being readied for a final pineal awakening. And of course, bringing the pineal into unification with the heart. So when this happened, this is a kind of funny story. When this happened, I was alone in a dark, it was nighttime. I was alone in a dark room at a friend's house. And, you know, something amazing happens for me personally in the dark. I just, my body relaxes, and I was in a very deep meditative state. And Waxela, I was awoken from this meditation with huge irritation, because in my perception, somebody had just put the lights on. And you know that feeling when you're in a beautiful dark room and then somebody puts these bright lights on? Well, I was instantly angry because I thought, what jerk has just walked into the room and put the lights on? So I opened my eyes, and to my shock and amazement, it was dark in the room. There was nobody there, and the lights weren't on. So I closed my eyes and I went inside, and the lights were on again. And then I did it a few times. I was checking, am I going crazy? What is this? And I realized it's dark out there, but it's light in here. It's not just light, it's blindingly light in here. So 2 things happened. And I've never shared it in this detail before, but I'm going to share it with you because I think it's just somehow relevant to come through today. So as this occurred, bear in mind I'm going dark, light, dark, light. There was this realization in me that said, wow, Kerry, your pineal gland has just shot open. And as the thoughts of you're really open right now, as the thought made its way from my left brain into cognizance, so this fear out of nowhere emerged. And I suddenly thought, I could be open to attack from the darkness. And so I began to almost imagine, and then through the imagining to draw in darkness. And I could really feel it. Could really feel oh, this icky, sticky, horrible darkness. And everything in me was going, no, 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 no. I don't want this. Everything in me was pushing it away. Resistance, resistance. And thankfully, I had one of my most trusted guides with me. She's an Arcturian guide. And she reminded me that I had surrendered. And she reminded me of the power of that surrender. And she encouraged me to surrender to the moment. And in my brain, I was going, oh, she is nuts. I cannot surrender to the darkness, of course. What did I do? Waxela, I carried on fighting. I carried on resisting. I carried on until eventually I felt that I was being, the more I pushed back, the more obviously it took over. And so I felt as if I was consumed by darkness. It was one of the scariest moments of my life. And I went like this, kind of like everything in me dropped. I was defeated. But at the same time, I was also surrendered. And in that exact moment, something so miraculous occurred. Suddenly, the light that I had originally seen was back. But it was so expansive now that it wasn't just inside my mind's eye. When I closed my eyes, I could feel it in my fingertips. I could feel it in my hair. Every part of my body was light. I didn't even know if I was physical at that point. The light was so intense, and I'm pretty convinced if somebody would have walked into the room, I was glowing, because that's what it felt like. It felt so iridescent and so tangible. I wasn't imagining or sensing this experience. I was feeling this light. And I said to the light, I think this is so funny. I think this is such a human moment. Guess what I said to the light? I said, run, run, the darkness is here. And it's just, it really is a deeply human moment to tell the light to run from the dark. Yeah, I can't even tell you what I was thinking in that moment, but the light was like, we know, we've come to show you what oneness looks like. So the light began to surround me, engulf me. It was in me, it was around me. And so the darkness became consumed by the light until the darkness was light. And the light itself was somehow richer, somehow deeper, and somehow brighter, for having taken in its counterpart. There was such a grounded sense of wholeness, and there was true union. And in that true union, I was in samadhi. That was samadhi. It was the moment of realizing I am this unification. I am this light and dark made into one. And as soon as that understanding began to kind of sink into my body and my bones and my brain, this bliss, this expansive, undulating bliss began to ripple out of me into what felt like the whole world. And I realized I was sharing it with the world. I could feel the world echoing it back to me. I can't tell you how long I was there for. It could have been a couple of hours. It could have been about maybe, I'm guessing, 3-4 hours. It felt like years. In my mind, I thought, wow, I must have really aged. And because it felt like I was there for years, it really did. And in my mind, I'd even imagined that my family had come to see me, but I couldn't hear them and they couldn't hear me, but they knew that I was okay and that I was in this bliss state, and they were kind of happy for me, and I was going to wake up and everybody would be 30 years older. It was that kind of perception. But of course, I woke up and only a couple of hours had passed. So in that time, in that samadhi state, I was everywhere. I was everything. And it was such an all-knowingness that the moment I thought of something, instantly The answer was there before the question could even finish. It was exquisite. It was magnificent. And yes, it was an experience that I had, but I don't by any means think that it was limited to Kerry. Like, I don't think I'm the only one that's had this experience, nor do I think I'm the only one that was ever meant to have it. I feel that I had that experience in order to share with others how to invite that samadhi state into their being and into their lives. So yeah, that's part of the journey, Waxela. It was amazing.
What a beautiful story. Thank you for sharing all of that. And I think it's really helpful for people to hear. I know for me, you know, I've certainly had my own experiences, but unique to
Oh,
me. And so it can show up in so many different forms in
yeah,
different ways. And our paths are all different, but yet they're all kind of leading to the same place
yeah,
ultimately.
yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
that was gorgeous. So, I would really love to hear more about the Galactic Federation of Light and your connection to them, and what are you receiving about this very interesting time in human history right now?
Wow. So there's a couple of books there. there's so much information there. But what comes to mind is the Galactic Federation of Light is a conglomerate of a number of different star beings, obviously, from mostly within this galaxy, but some neighboring galaxies as well. So it's kind of like a galactic family. The Galactic Federation is like a galactic family. And what they do is they have a policy of non-interference, because they learned through their own mistakes, because even higher dimensional beings make mistakes. They learned that interference, especially with low density beings, makes room for worship.
Mm.
The moment we go into worship, and the historical record will show, this is what we did in Egypt, this is what we've done so many times in the past. We have been in the presence of non-terrestrial beings, higher dimensional beings, and we've gone into worship. And the moment that we do that, we go into a devaluing of self and an overvaluing of another. We create imbalance. We don't listen to them then. We don't listen when they say, you are us. Because this is a message we'll always hear from them. You are us. We are the same. We are equal. See, again, this is one of those times where it just becomes very nice words, but the words aren't really sinking in, because we're going, nah, that can't be true. I could never be that magnificent. I could never be that all-knowing, or whatever the case may be. So their policy is absolute non-interference until such time as humanity can be responsible for their own awakening. So they're here to support us as we venture into awakening, mostly in dream states, and until that time in a person's life where they are truly autonomous. In other words, they don't need a guru, they're leading themselves. They don't need external validation or an external God teacher of any description. At that point, that person would be available to conversation in body, if that's what was called for, with the Galactic Federation. But until that time happens, there's a lot of dream state conversation where it's all happening, it's all kind of being imprinted, it's going into deep layers of I want to say the unconscious mind, but it's not the unconscious as in the fast asleep state. It's just not, it doesn't register in the conscious part of the brain. That's all it is. So there's what I would lovingly call night school. There's night schools that's been going on for years and years and years with the Galactic Federation. Sometimes people have these dreams, and in these dreams they say to me, it felt like someone was talking non-stop the whole night long. That's kind of what it feels like when we have these long dreams in these night schools with the Galactics. So they're very connected to humanity. They're very a part of, highly aware of everything that we feel, everything we're going through. They're very hands off until we bring ourselves into that personal empowerment. But they've been with us on this planet literally for thousands of years. And their agreement is to support humanity's ascension. We misinterpret what that means, though. As third dimensional beings, we think, well, then they must come in and fix this mess that we're in. But of course, they're not going to. Of course, what they're going to do is they're going to support us in getting ourselves capable and responsible to be the ones who lead ourselves into our higher state. So they're mostly 5D beings and up, 6, 7, 8D, and even beyond. Within the Galactic Federation, so the Galactic Federation of Light is a very, very large, for want of a better word, it's not the right word, it's just the best word I can think of right now. They're a very large organization. Within that organization, there are smaller councils within the Galactic Federation. And those smaller councils tend to be very involved in the affairs of humanity, in what's playing out right now. They have made contact with many political leaders. The political leaders, some of them, not all, are very connected and very aware of them. Some of them are working directly with the Galactic Federation of Light, and of course others are not. So they're very involved in a very invisible way, purposefully so. But their ships are surrounding our planet right now in their droves. I'm not talking about hundreds. And I'm actually not even talking about thousands. I'm talking about hundreds of thousands, but probably more like millions of craft surrounding our planet. And when I say that to people, they go, our planet, Earth, our little insignificant planet. And the answer is yes, because of course we're not insignificant. We're incredibly far from insignificant and phenomenally supported. Obviously, most of the ships are cloaked, but more and more, we're seeing a lot of uncloaked ships coming into view. There's more sightings than ever before. And I think that's going to continue. I think as we move forward in time, what's happening is even when a ship is cloaked, for those who are awakened and have the eyes to see, they'll see right through the cloaking. So I've had a lot of people say to me, I've got this really beautiful Facebook group where we have these conversations and people will say, here's a picture of clouds. So maybe they post a picture and they say, look at that cloud over there. Doesn't that look just like a ship? And others will come in and perhaps validate it or query it or whatever the case may be. But the point remains that as soon as a person starts to raise frequency, they start to see through that which was previously hidden, both the negative and the positive. And that cloaking is becoming less and less effective, more and more transparent, so that we can really gear ourselves up for full-bodied, awakened state interaction, because that's obviously the next step. But it's not going to be Hollywood movie style. It's not going to be what people think in terms of, you know, this mass TV announcement. It's going to, when we have contact, it's going to be done in such a way that humanity is going to go, oh, that was no big deal. Honestly, that's how people are going to feel about it. It's going to be like, oh, that was wonderful, was amazing, but yeah, it felt so normal. It felt so natural. It felt so right. That's what people are going to say. They're not going to say, oh my gosh, crazy panic hysteria. Can you believe what happened? It's not going to be that. There's going to be an energy of centeredness, of calm, of elation, but grounded, calm, still on the inside. And why do I know that? Because I've been around them long enough to know that they're capable of influencing our energy field. So where a normal reaction could be the hysterical happiness, which by the way, I've done before when seeing them in the sky and learned firsthand that that is not how to bring them closer. They will disappear very, very quickly. They need our centeredness. So I've learned firsthand that they can support us and influence the energy field around us. And if enough of us get the signals at the same time, that influences humanity, the rest of the collective, into that same, still elated, but very grounded and calm at the same time kind of experience. And that's what it's going to be like when the connections start to happen. It's quite likely that there'd be a lot of one-on-one connections that happen before then. They've already begun. They've already been rolling out for years and years. It's just that now, instead of it being like 1 in 1,000 people, it's more like 1 in about 80 people at the moment that is experiencing a direct, not a dream state, a direct waking state conversation. So 1 in 80, that's a lot of people.
Yeah.
That's a lot of people. So that's preparation. That's just normalizing and preparation. But the real ultimate goal that they have for us is empowerment. If I were to put it in one word, that one word would be empowerment. To get humanity back to being able to recognize that we are gods, that we always have been. And we were, in a sense, robbed of the title, robbed of our throne. But nobody has the power to give it back to us. The only available option is for us to crown ourselves and rethrone ourselves again as we recognize, oh yeah, I forgot. I am a God being. I am a goddess. I am divine. I am magnificent. I am worthy. I am all of these things. I am the collective. I am part of the collective, and I am the collective simultaneously. These are all considered to be the recrowning ideologies. So this is where we reinstate ourselves. And I think for humanity, that's a milestone beyond any milestone. To think of us at that place where we would be able to deem ourselves worthy, where we would be able to reclaim, not ask somebody to give it back to us, but to reclaim the truth of who we are. I think that's where we're headed to. That's their vision for humanity. And we're on track.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And I really get, like, I feel that as true. And I've been seeing those ships since, well, actually I've been visited since early childhood, but seeing them and realizing who and what they were since I was a teenager. So yeah, I do notice that it seems like more and more people are aware of their presence and seeing them, and I think that is sort of the unveiling, or the what people have talked about for so many years. It's not about suddenly the government is going to announce, oh yeah, by the way, there really are aliens. It's about raising our frequency, ascending to a point where our consciousness can have that contact.
Exactly.
For all of your information and everything you do, you're just such a delightful being to know and to be able to interact with. And I absolutely love who you are and your work and your presence. Thank you.
The feeling is mutual. Thanks, Waxela. Thanks for having me. Lots of love to you and to everybody listening. Thank you for being here. Thank you for partaking. It's just the most heartwarming thing to feel this audience growing and expanding with us. So yeah, just thank you for putting this all together.
Truly my pleasure. And for anyone watching, for everyone watching, please join the Facebook page and let us know what resonated for you. What did you learn? What was your favorite part or your least favorite part of this conversation today? And I'll be sure to jump in there. Maybe we can get Kerry to jump in and answer questions too. And
I'd love to.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. And so, the biggest reason why I do this work is to bring us all together, to know we don't have to do this alone. We are one big family of light ascending together. And thank you for being part of the family of light. And so with that,
Thank you.
yeah, with that, I'll sign off. I love you, everybody, and namaste.
Lots of love. Thank you.